Okay, in this video, what I would like to cover with you is just how to utilize a question in Google Classroom and facilitate some discussion with some of your students. So I'm going to go through the entire process of creating the question, and then I'll show you some of the options that you may have to configure and how the students are going to see things on their end. So what we're going to do here is in a classroom, we're going to go to Create under Classwork, and we're going to click Question. And so this is going to be the screen that we're prompted with in order to create the question. So I'm dealing with a computer science class here, so I'm going to ask a question. Which loop structure do you prefer? You can see here I have some options. I could create a multiple choice question from this if I wanted to. If I did that, I would have the ability to add some options. But I'm going to leave it as a short answer. And then what I can also do is provide the students with some instructions. So I'm going to say, give at least one reason for your answer. Okay, that gives the question title and the instructions that the students can see. And then I can set some of these parameters. So this is for, and this will be which particular Google Classroom I'm dealing with. The default should be the current one. This will be for which students you want to create that question. By default, it's going to be all of them. If you're going to grade it, it's going to provide you with a number of points. By default, that's 100. If it's ungraded, you could just choose that, or you could change the 100 to a value of your choice. If you have a due date, if this is an asynchronous type of activity where the students will get to it at some point and you're not really sure when, but you do want to have it due by a particular time, you can certainly set a due date, and then you'll also have a time option there. If you have topics on your Google Classroom, like I do, if I choose that, I can either put that in the current topic or I can create a new topic. I'm just going to leave that in the classwork area. If you forget to select the topic, that's perfectly fine. You can always drag and drop it into the appropriate place later on. Now these two options down here are things that you want to pay some close attention to. So by default here I have checked students can reply to each other. So what this is going to do is allow students to see their classmates' answers and then add some kind of reply. And this is a great opportunity to facilitate some group discussion within your classroom. If you do choose to use this though, I would recommend that you make sure that you detail to your students exactly how you expect them to be replying to each other, especially if you're using this in a graded environment, in an asynchronous environment where perhaps their replies are considered their participation in this particular activity. You want to really make sure that you specify for the students what kind of responses you expect to see, how many replies or responses you expect to see, things of that nature. So one way you can do that, if you have not established that precedent already in your classroom, you could do that in the instructions. So for example, I could say give at least one reason for your answer, and then I would say when finished, comment on at least one classmate response. And perhaps I give a little bit of detail as to what kind of reply or comment I want. But for now, I'm just going to leave it at that, and you can detail that however you wish. Now, the one thing to keep in mind here is that when you choose to use this setting, there is another setting in the background that could pose a problem. I have seen and heard that this is currently a problem at the time of this recording. In the past, it may not have been an issue, so just keep that in mind. We're going to have to do something here, possibly, depending on whether or not Google Classroom corrects this or changes this in the future. So just keep posted to the rest of my video. And then you can also check to see if the students can edit their answer. So you can use this at your discretion. Do you want the students to be able to go back and edit their answers? That's up to you in what you're trying to accomplish here. I'm going to leave that unchecked because I'd like them to be able to reply to each other, and I don't want what they're replying to change throughout the process. But again, that's up to you. You can detail that however you wish. Okay, once we're set with that question, we can go ahead and choose how we're going to ask that. So if we just take a look at the upper right hand side, you'll see this option says ask. If we click that, that's going to ask that question immediately. The other options that we have are to either just save that as a draft, something that we can come back to later, or we can schedule that. All right, so if we wanted to schedule that to post to our Google Classroom at a later time, we could certainly set that. I'm going to go ahead and just click ask. And what that's going to do is it's going to add that question to my topic of classwork. Now, if we hop over here to my student screens, you'll see I have 2 students loaded over here. This is not something that you will be able to do, but I'm just showing you this so you can benefit from seeing it from the student perspective. In many cases, the student screen will just update automatically once it senses that there is something new added to the classwork area. But if the students don't see it, they can go ahead and refresh their screens and they should be able to see it. So I'm going to go ahead and take a look at this student here. I'm just going to click this classwork question. And I apologize, the screen is a little small, but I wanted to make sure I get 2 perspectives up on the screen at the same time. So here you can see, here's the question that I typed before. Which loop structure do you prefer? And then here are the instructions. So when the student sees that question for the first time, they're going to see pretty much everything that they need to see. When it was posted, if there's a due date, what the question is, and whatever instructions you have left them. And then they can go down here and click View Question, and this is going to provide them with an opportunity to answer it. Okay, so let's take a look at that. And then we'll go down to this other student, and we'll see here that they're pretty much seeing the exact same thing. And now they have an opportunity to answer it. So let's go ahead and give some answers here. For this student, I'm just going to say the while loop. It is easier to think through. All right, we'll turn that in. And you can see here that it's prompting them, do you really want to submit that answer? Because you won't be able to make changes to your answer if you submit it. And that's because of what we set before, that they wouldn't be able to edit their answers. So we'll go ahead and click turn in here. And what we see here is their answer. And then we can see classmates' answers. So let's go ahead and click this. And we can see that they can't see their classmates' answers because the other classmate has not put anything in here. So let's go over here to this one. We'll say the for loop. And we'll say it is easier when iterating through lists. And we'll turn that in. And there we see their answer. And if we click See Classmates Answers, then we can see the classmates' answers here. Now, you will notice that we have a reply here. So what this is going to allow the student to do is to reply to a particular student's answer. But let me just show you something real quick over here on the teacher end. If I go to the overall classroom settings, we're going to go down here to, I'm going to close this for now. If we go down to the stream, you'll notice that the option that I have selected is students can only comment. Now, typically when I instruct people on creating a Google Classroom, one of the first things I tell them to do is to change this stream setting, because by default, it's students can post and comment, and that can really cause a lot of problems on your Google Classroom. So what I recommend is people change it to only teachers can post or comment. And that's pretty much what most people have. So if I go ahead and save that, all right, and we come back here, if I refresh this for my students, okay, you can see that we've lost the ability to reply to the other students now. All right, even though I've provided them with that option in the question settings, they've lost the ability to reply to their students. And that's directly tied to that setting in Google Classroom. So under the teacher, you have to be aware of that fact. If you want them to be able to discuss and reply using the questions, you're going to have to change this stream setting to one of these two options. Students can post and comment, which I probably don't recommend, or students can only comment. So if I set this again, students can only comment, and I save it, then if we come back, we can refresh their screens, and now the students have the opportunity again to reply to their classmates. All right, so that's important to understand. Now you're going to have to make a decision whether or not you really want that or not. What you can do is, if you have a situation where you want them to discuss something once and then not really have the ability to comment on anything else later, you can always just go back and change that setting, as I did. But it's something to keep in mind. And if I recall correctly, Google Classroom has kind of gone back and forth with this setting and how it works. So you just want to be aware of the fact that that setting could pose a problem. It's very possible in the future that Google Classroom works this out so that we can set it so that only teachers can post and comment, but then for the questions, the students will have the ability to reply. I do not know. I don't know when that's going to be or if it will ever be, so we just need to be aware of that particular feature. All right, now if I go to these students here, now the students have the ability to apply. So here I have my Charlie Bucket student up here at the top, and he's going to read Ferris Bueller, so he's going to need to reply. So he's going to reply to that, and he's going to leave some kind of comment. And let's say he says that is true, but it only benefits you in certain situations. And then he can go ahead and reply or post that. All right, and you can see that there's one reply there. If I click that, then I can see that reply. And then Ferris down here can go to Charlie Bucket and he can add a comment. That is true, but I find I often forget to increment my loop variable. And if this is not making any sense to you, because computer science class is perfectly fine, I think you just get the idea of what the students can actually do. And now we can see that Charlie Bucket for himself sees that he has a reply, so he can go ahead and click that, and he can read that, and he can also reply himself. Yes, I can understand that. And so you can see here we have a little discussion thread going with this question. Now the question you may have at this point is, well, what does the teacher see? Well, let's go ahead and go into this particular question here. You notice that if I just click that once, I get some information about it from my perspective. We have the question here, and we can see how many students have actually turned this in. So the turn in process is the students answering that question. So I see that 2 students have answered that question. So I can go ahead and click this, and then what I see are my students listed. I can see their answer, what it is that they typed, the answer to the question, and then I can see how many replies there are. And I can also see who has replied, and I can read those replies. So this, again, can facilitate some good classroom discussion and allows you as a teacher to have an overview over it, and you can also use this as an assessment opportunity or just to get an idea as to where a student is at. One of the things that you can also do as a teacher is you can reply yourself. All right, you can add replies, and you can also delete or mute a student. So if you have a situation where a student is just not following your guidelines and you just feel like you need to get them out of that particular reply or question, you can mute them. If you find that there's a comment that just is not appropriate or is not necessary, you can go ahead and delete that. So you have the ability to do that as the teacher. All right, so that gives you an overview of how to use a Google Classroom question to facilitate some classroom discussion. Again, you don't need to use it for the classroom discussion. You can certainly use it for something else, perhaps a motivational activity or a closure activity, or just to get some kind of engagement from the students on a particular day. But I leave it to you to utilize it to the best of your ability in your classroom.